Welcome, everyone. We are about 5 minutes past the hour, so I think we will go ahead and get started. I'm really pleased to introduce Serita Colette this morning. Serita is a queer person of color, a national organizer and healer in the art and science of sustainable healing on occupied Indigenous land. Let me see, sorry, I lost my place. In 2015, Sarita established one of the first people of color yoga and Ayurveda practices in Minneapolis, and her work intersects trauma relief, liberation, gender, race, class, sexuality, mutual aid funding, resilience-based practices, body work, and rest. Sarita was featured in Rolling Stone in June as one of 15 healing justice practitioners in Minneapolis. And for the last 3 years, Sarita's been leading QT BIPOC rest and liberation retreats and workshops across the country. You can learn more about Sarita in the contributors section on Attendify, her website, saritayoga.com, or her Patreon, which you can find by searching her name on Patreon. I do want to point out that we have closed captioning of this session. So if you need closed captions, the link is on the upper left where it says live on otter.ai. I will also copy the stream link into the chat, and I will turn it over to Sarita. It will probably have additional folks trickle in. We're just having people muted upon entry so that there's no disruption.
All right, just doing a sound check. Can you hear me okay? Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for the really lovely introduction. I feel like I spend now life meeting people in the virtual realm. So, Ariane, nice to meet you properly here. And peace and good morning, good day to everyone. I imagine most people are joining from Minneapolis, and I know it's been pretty chilly, so hope you're cozy and settled. And yeah, I'm really delighted to be a part of this, especially thinking about when I was asked to do this, it was a question of where in the programming should we land a meditation. And I always think it's nice for organizations, for events to actually have some way of closing that doesn't necessarily close off or siphon off the ideas. The intention or desire, but actually open us back up. And so in this, I want to just start by doing, I'll do like a little Dharma talk on resting, digesting, healing. What do I mean by that? We'll do a little bit of breath work and some embodiment. And I actually think it's nice to start with the breath. So it's really easy to forget that our consciousness has the capacity to change when we give more fluidity and ease to our breath. That actually, breathing gives us life, right? So right now your body is regulating and your nervous system is regulating, your organs are regulating, blood flow. There's constant movement happening in your inner world, and naturally you're breathing. But I think often, as much as our breath gives us life, what about giving life to our breathing? So just notice for a moment where you're seated. We often find ourselves in these last 6 months, it's like we're in a pandemic, and this is how we meet most people in the world that are outside of our quarantine pods. And there's a way in which unconsciously we can get used to the screen. So I just want you to notice, are you comfortable? Are you seated in a way that supports your right and left hip, that supports your pelvis? Where are your feet? Are they touching the ground? Are you lying in bed? And what other things can you grab in your area that can support ease? So, whenever we talk about embodiment or meditation or practice, we're talking about comfort. We're talking about an ability to find what in Sanskrit is known as shtiram sukham asanam, steadiness and ease in my practice. And I don't know if you can see this, but People who study yoga will talk about Patanjali, one of the earliest sages of the yogic tradition. And one of the first things that's written in the text of yoga is that phrase, Shtiram Sukham Asanam. And I'll just repeat what that means in English: steadiness and ease in my practice. And practice meaning literally a practice. So if you practice an instrument growing up, or practiced a sport, or practiced anything, a hobby, it changes. You change with it. And so, in that moment of change, how do we find steadiness? And then a way in which we can seat ourselves rather, the asana, the meditation, in steadiness is rest, is to digest and heal. And, we are on occupied land. We are in a global pandemic, and we are also in a global uprising for Black liberation, and the liberation of all people, but specifically Black lives. And so, my guess is everybody entering this space is entering with some type of engagement on a regular basis with all of those things. And then on top of that, we have an election. And so, the question of how do I meet each day seated in my truth, meeting my needs, and prioritizing what Audre Lorde called self preservation. So I don't often use the word or term self care because I think of self preservation as like, how do we come back to ourselves? And what I love about the yogic tradition, if you really get into the tradition, and not the mainstream whitewashed versions, but if you really get into the tradition, yoga and Ayurveda as sciences and spiritual practices are about remembrance, not body attainment. So, how do I get back to my truth? How do I get back to a place of remembering who I am in deep change, especially when change is unsettling, can break us, can really make us start to lose sight of who am I? What is my purpose in the world? What do I need to do to be in right relationship with myself, with the movement, and with my community? And one way that I engage those questions, and how many humans for centuries engaged it, was to sit and reflect. So, as you're seated, I want you to just take a moment to close your eyes and just let the eyelids soften to close and let your face relax. And the first thing I do when I come into a state of meditation is awareness. And I like to ask, how am I doing? So I'll ask you that as you close your eyes, as you greet yourself today. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And just noticing, is the body feeling whatever thoughts are coming to your mind in this moment? Are you feeling tired or fatigued? Are you feeling maybe a little bit of lethargy this morning, the damp and heaviness of the snow? Or maybe feeling a little bit anxious about something you're looking forward to, or a deadline. And then notice how that actually comes alive in your body, that feeling. And take a moment, just notice the sensation on the surface of your skin. What is that? Is there a sensation, a tingling? Can you feel into that? And are there parts of your body which are more awake right now, more alive and energized? Are there parts of your body maybe that you can't feel into, or maybe a dullness or a heaviness or a pain? And just sort of feeling the wholeness of yourself. And without needing to change the breath, and without giving any judgment, The process of awareness is to be a witness with loving kindness. Just notice how you're breathing. So everybody breathes differently. From the moment of the inhale at the beginning, middle, and end, to the moment of the exhale at the beginning, middle, and end. And what we'll do is just consciously slow down the rate of how you're breathing in this moment to regulate the nervous system. So with your eyes closed, I want you to begin to feel your inhale now and feel its capacity as you breathe in the lower abdomen. Feel it rise, spreading the rib cage, opening the lungs all the way into the upper chest and the underside of your collarbones. And as you exhale, I want you to feel this downward release as the lungs soften and that gentle contraction that naturally happens as the navel goes toward your spine. And just continue to let your focus be on that, this incredible movement, this energy that's inside of us as we breathe. And as you feel into that and consciously slow down your breath, I want you to see if you can begin to regulate it 1 to 1. So some people like to count the breath, and that might just simply be an inhale of 1, 2, 3, exhaling out 3, 2, and 1. And as you continue that 1 to 1 ratio, just allow the body to receive. Let go of the desire to do and be. So one of the incredible powers of breathing is bringing out balance and steadiness. And the 1 to 1 is known as sama, which means same, equanimity, and balance. So sama vritti, 1 to 1. And just continue to breathe in that way. And let's take about 5 or 8 breaths. So as we come into our seat, it really is about letting go of hurriedness, letting go of a need to rush. And you may notice even now, just very subtly, as you begin to slow down life, you begin to feel more deeply. And you might just notice a softening. And if you don't, allow that to happen. The softening of the root of your neck, relaxing your shoulders. And each time that you exhale, let it be this cascading release down toward earth. And just continue in that way for a few more breaths, allowing the body to be breathed. Nice. And now I want you to, with your eyes closed, you can keep them open, but sometimes it's nice to close the eyes. I want you to just rub your palms gently to create some warmth between your hands. And then with the palms, begin to massage your face. And you can start right at the forehead and just begin above your eyebrows, massaging the brow ridge, and go all the way out to the temples slowly. Just massaging out any tension that's held at the forefront of the mind, along the temples. And as you do that, notice if there's any heat in this region of the body. And if so, just let that exhale come out the mouth like you're blowing out a candle to release any heat. If you're feeling quite cool, slow down the rate of the massage and let it be a little bit heavier. So bringing in the science of Ayurveda. And continue the massage. So you might have done the temples, and then take the index finger and thumb and just begin to massage your earlobes. Start at the top, slowly working your way to the bottom of the earlobe. And when you get to the bottom, a couple of tugs, opening up the ear canals, starting to open up the senses, and starting to awaken the facial muscles. So the bridge of the nose. And as you do this, you may go along the cheeks and the cheekbone, and that's really nice, especially in the morning as we get into this new climate of weather, sinus congestion, that mucosal lining is starting to break that up. And as you do all of that, maintaining that really nice, steady breath. And then I want you to continue down into the jawline. So we tend to clench or hold our thoughts, what we are trying to digest. Sometimes that doesn't get digested, can get held in our jaw. So take a moment to really surrender to massaging the jaw all the way down. And then allow the hands, when you're ready, no rush, to come to the neck, the throat center. Sorry to say this to students, but this particular area, it's our throat, it's our neck, yes, it's our cervical spine, yes, it's also the area between your head and your heart, and holds so much alongside your creativity, your truth. It also can hold tension of what we're trying to digest between the mind and the heart mind. So be really nice here and just allow a sensation of whatever type of pressure you need this morning to assuage any tension. Really nice. And then continue to bring that out along your shoulders. So you have these large muscles, our rhomboids, trapezius, all these tons of tissue and fascia here. And again, this too, with such proximity to our hearts, as you cross your arms and take opposite hand to opposite shoulder, you may find that just this level of pressure starts to kind of move things. And you can take opposite hand to opposite head of shoulder and just give it a nice big squeeze. And going down to the biceps and triceps, really nice deep squeeze. And the elbows. And down to the forearms. And down to the wrists. And then let your hands say hello to one another. If you're on a computer or phone, and I know everyone is on one of those things all the time, we hold that tension in our hands. The hands, each finger is said to line up with the elements air, ether, water, fire, and earth. So give those some loving kindness. And when you're ready, rub your palms again and just rest lightly, one hand on top of the other, right over your sternum, 3 inches to the right of your anatomical heart, now resting over your heart center, the energetic heart. And as you soften the eyes back to close, just remember this part of yourself. As you start to feel into that, I want you to feel into it as this is the part of me, the one who is unchanged amidst change. And take a nice full breath into that. And a nice big exhale. Beautiful. And you can just gently release your hands. So, my work is in rest and liberation. I started doing this a while back. I was teaching and seeing really the importance of work like Nidra, Yoga Nidra, and you've probably heard of that if you've studied any type of yoga or gone to a studio. A lot of people talk about it as yogic sleep. But Nidra is actually a deep practice of meditation to open us up to who we are beyond our job, beyond relationships. And that is the purpose really of meditation is who am I? What is my purpose? And in a pandemic and uprising, I've experienced this too. A lot of my clients ask like, well, what do I do now? I know for a lot of, I work with a lot of educators, I work with a lot of artists, people who lived very externally with their job, and their job has changed. Or if you're an educator, taking a leave of absence, an artist, you don't get to do shows, any type of job that depended on interacting with people. And I always say, you are who you are out beyond just this job in your life. And so rest is really important because it's a reminder of, oh, okay, even though all of this is going on right now in my life, I'm still at my core a teacher or an artist or a musician or however you show up in the world. So, example, yes, I'm a yoga teacher, but I also work in healing justice and facilitation and consulting. And anytime anyone asks, well, what do you do? I often say you should probably just come to a workshop. Or when the time is right, come on retreat, because that's when you start to feel what I do. And I can't teach in a yoga studio, and I don't do in person private sessions. Everything is for everyone's safety and harm reduction and collective care online. And that doesn't mean that I am not still in my dharma, in my purpose. So, working with change really requires rest, slowing down. And I have a couple of friends out there who also have been building dialogue with community, specifically BIPOC. One is Trisha Hersey, who runs the NAP ministry. I highly recommend her work. She talks a lot about grind culture. And yeah, there's a number of people who are now starting to really become more awake to, yeah, the protests are necessary, but so is your rest and self preservation. So I want you to just continue to keep your breath at a steady pace. And I want you to just allow a little bit of movement. So, rolling the shoulders and um, any kind of movement, maybe drawing the chin down, rolling the head one way and the other. So, anytime we get into practices, there's a tendency to be like, okay, I'm listening and I'm doing. But the practice of being is really being open to yourself and saying, okay, well, I got to roll my shoulders. They're actually speaking to me, or my low back is speaking to me. So, I'm going to turn one way and then the other as she's talking, or whatever needs to be done. And so I just want to talk about digestion a little bit on both a physical and an energetic level. Digestion is, our physical body's process of maintaining nutrients and excreting waste. And we do this every day. And on a deeper level, digestion in life is really essential to being able to take care of ourselves. And so, what I mean by that is, I want you to just think for a moment without judgment. How much news are you taking in right now on average per day? How many hours of news? And when I say news, I don't necessarily mean watching Channel 4, Channel 5, or whatever news channel. I'm talking about social media, Twitter, Instagram, blogs, the internet. I'm also talking about conversations that you have, whether it's at work or with friends or relationships. And the discussion right now that's prominent for a lot of people is this election. But just notice, how much news are you taking in? How many sources of that? And then how much of that are you digesting? Meaning, how much time are you taking each day to just move through that, not have that live in you without judgment, just noticing? And then thinking about what does it look like to create a little bit more space for less external worldly life, to draw more deeply into that inner life. And just imagine, what does that look like if you were to wake up tomorrow morning and give yourself a little bit more space? And you can first think about, well, how do you wake up right now? How did you wake up this morning? Was it with a phone? And what was your relationship to that? So, a lot of people use their phones for alarms, things like that. But how did you wake up? And what would it look like tomorrow if you woke up and if your phone is your alarm, you turn the alarm off if you're using that, and then you spend the first 30 minutes not looking at a screen? So, one of the big practices within the tradition talks often about ojas. Ojas is a reservoir of vitality seated at that place I talked about earlier, the heart center. And a reservoir of vitality is stoked, is built, and is maintained by rest, by things like being in good conversation that is life giving. It is walking under the moonlight, nourishing meals, laughter. Ojas is if you have held a baby and let that baby just fall on your chest. That's some really good ojas. Ojas can be dismantled by anger. If we hold too much anger in our lives and don't digest it, ojas can also can dissipate by too much fear, too much feeling like incapacity, immobilization, inability to speak, do, think. And ojas can die out with too much screen time. And yoga and Ayurveda are sister sciences, so I can say all of this, and you can say, well, I don't really know about this spiritual talk. So you try it out. And a homework assignment that everyone can do is to limit screen time by beginning a digital sunset. So every night for this week, you choose to no longer have a screen for an hour before you go to bed. And if you're like, well, I already do that, great. Then figure out how you can limit screen times during the day. For me, I pretty much always have my phone on Do Not Disturb. I even have those limitations on social media. So it'll say, like, your 15 minutes are coming to a close. And I also like to switch it up no matter the climate. So it's pretty cold out, and we're talking about digestion. After lunch, go for a digestive walk if you can, or do something that involves some type of movement to literally digest your food. In the colder season, which in Ayurveda is known as Vata, this season we are in, Vata is wind, it is air, it is ether. It literally means to move. And in these colder seasons, what happens is a lot of people start to lose focus, movement, constant change, the thinness of the air, the dryness, the crispness. It's hard to focus and concentrate. And that might not be for everyone, but a lot of people feel that sort of like, how can I just like keep my mind focused and not just on work, but on like what it is that's going to provide for you throughout the day, which is you. So I like to bundle up, go for a digestive walk, maybe even get a little bit of sweat from that walk. And what that does is I'm allowing my body to digest the food I've just taken in. And you'll find that when you come back to whatever it is you're focusing on, your mind has more space now, not to be clouded and become dull from the body using so much energy to digest your food in this cold weather, but now can actually focus on what you're focusing. So, physical and energetic digestion and that connection to your mind are right there. It's all connected. And then other ways of digesting rather, is cleansing work. And I'll be doing a workshop before the election coming up in a couple weeks, and I'll be giving tips on Instagram probably about what does it mean to cleanse. And I'm not talking about like, okay, I'm going on a strict diet. Diet really doesn't have that language a place in yoga and Ayurveda. What I'm talking about is uh, I know a lot of people watched the debate recently, and I got a ton of texts from people saying, "Are you watching this? It's horrible." And I saw them later. I didn't watch it, and I do keep up to date with what's going on, but I just couldn't really bear to sit in front of a screen and listen to lies that aren't just these out there commentary, but actually about people that I love, communities that I'm in, and our world. And uh, but sometimes we need to be informed. And so if you're going to check in or tune in to things that might make you a little tense, first of all, as you're doing that, maybe your job requires you to do that. Um, it's always good to like be in embodiment. Like if you're in a situation where you're taking in energy of something else and it's intense, it's news, election, whatever, notice how you're physically doing and how you're breathing. Notice what emotion becomes most present. Is it anger or anxiety? And after that, if you just simply go back to your screen or talking to people, you're not really digesting what you just took in. And so for me, cleansing is burning something. I have some incense burning now that I always burn when I'm doing sessions. Um, I like to just kind of waft it over my body. But other things are like, I will literally, after sessions, take water and swish it around my mouth and spit it out. Washing your hands obviously has become more talked about with the pandemic, but for me, I always washed my hands after sessions as sort of like, not like I'm working with people who aren't clean, but for myself to really just let go of that energy that is constantly moving, screen or no screen. And then other ways in which you can cleanse are just to literally create space in your home. Um, if you don't have an altar, this is a great time to make one. And behind me, I have a little vase. I've got a candle. It's really a decanter, actually, and I put water in it. And so, whenever I'm doing like a meeting or a session or anything that I need to like find intention but also release, the water is a way of just taking in that energy, and then you dump it out at the end of the day. Another digestion cleansing practice that I like to do is to burn something. Um, Especially if I'm dealing with an emotion like anger or grief or anxiety that's coming up for me around something specific that I need to let go of. And you hear let go a lot in the yogic world, and sometimes I feel like it's misplaced and used for spiritual bypassing. That's not this. What I'm talking about is something that's coming up in your life that your mind is continually pointing toward that is not serving your higher purpose, or what I talked about earlier, that unchanging part of yourself amidst change, your truth. So I like to write it down and literally destroy it, whether that's ripping it up or burning it and then getting rid of what that is, putting it in the trash, getting it out of your house. That's a great ritual. And we're coming up on a full moon. Full moon is a time of more energy in the yogic tradition. Um, and it's a nice time to do rituals like that. And with ritual, it's your ritual, it's your practice. So there's no timeline. As you've probably heard a lot in the last couple of months, healing is not linear. So there's no timeline with this. Your trajectory is your own, and it is a practice. So I want to just do a soft meditation around the moon because we are coming on a full moon on the 31st on Halloween, an auspicious time. Um, and I want you to just close your eyes again and let your body soften back. And I just said a lot of things that your body is taking in, your mind, your breath, and just come right back to that purpose of regulation. So, the purpose of regulating our breath and our nervous system is to come back to being. And in this ratio, I want you, if possible, to bring your breath practice from 1 to 2. So, on the inhale, breathing in for 1, 2, 3. On your outhale, breathing out 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just let it be at your capacity. If those numbers don't match up, that's okay. But the idea is that now your exhale should start to be much longer than your inhale. This breath practice is invoking apana, the downward energy, to ground, and it's very important in winter, in Vata season, to invoke and invite this apana energy to go down, especially with this election and everything else we're dealing with. So continue to let the exhales go down, and as you're doing that, soften your brow, soften the root of your tongue. Let the root of the neck and shoulders relax. The hands softening down, palms down. And if you're feeling a little agitated or restless, I invite you to just take a nice sigh. And feel that all the way down your spine, and do that a couple times. And return to that breath practice of apana. And as you Continue to relax into this sensation. I want you as a witness to just come to the midbrain. And I want you to imagine a still lake in your mind. A quiet and still lake. And with the still lake of your mind, I want you to feel, see, or imagine a quiet lunar light ascending over the still lake of your mind. And the lunar energy is peaceful, tranquil, quiet. And as you sit with that imagery of the lunar energy softening in its reflection over the still lake of your mind, let that energy cascade down your physical body, softening the shoulders, relaxing the upper chest and back. Let your rib cage soften. Relax the abdominal organs. Feel the lunar energy softening down into the pelvis and low back, right and left hip. Feel it softening into the thighs, hamstrings. Feel it softening your knees. Let the shins and calves relax. Let that cascading downward energy, soft and peaceful, down the legs, the ankles, to the feet. And just allow the entire body to rest in a position of quietude, and the mind now drawn toward that lunar energy of peace. And as you continue to quiet and soften things, I invite a vichara practice. What do you need to do for yourself this week to rest, digest, heal? One thing that you don't need to share, prove to anyone. That is just an opportunity to bring about self-preservation. Of excess commentary. Right. And then when you're ready, just gathering the hands. Peace, peace, peace. So I like to offer some things before getting into a little reflection from you all, or questions. Just some things that you can do. So I asked that question in the meditation. Vichara is known as like a practice of asking. And it's really important when we're dealt with sort of inner turmoil of something going on in our life. Why is this continuing to happen to me? That's a place where meditation comes in, to sit and ask. And however you embody or practice meditation or time for yourself, asking a question that can bring about space. And sometimes the meditation is also helpful because we can analyze with friends or analyze in our thoughts. But when we start to slow things down and come into our breath and body, there's not so much analyzation as space to say, you think about people when they have ideas. When you have a great idea, are you making this face? Is it tense? Usually when someone has an idea, it's like there's this gesture of space, of openness, of, it's like this relaxed, really sweet feeling. So some ways to just continue to move into resting, digesting, and healing are I don't know if you do a neti practice, if that's something that you've been doing, but if not, I really encourage it. Neti pots you can get at honestly the grocery store now, they're everywhere. And yoga and Ayurveda work together as sister sciences. And in winter season, in all seasons, but especially now, I know a lot of people are dealing with congestion. But also, we're in a pandemic that brings about serious respiratory issues. COVID-19 creates respiratory issues for the lungs. And so, it's so important that we have a practice that cleans out our mucosal lining. And also pollution, like the actual physical pollution of the world right now is crazy because of climate crisis. And so you're literally cleaning that out. And then that energetic pollution, the stuff that we see in the news that's just like too much. There's violence. So I also like to use neti pot for that. It's like that cleaning and washing. And I have like a YouTube. It's probably on my website as well, but there's a YouTube if you just type in my name. If you've never used neti pot, it's really awkward, and it's me literally showing people how to use it. And a lot of my clients have said, you know what, I never wanted to use it because it sounded weird, but I looked at your YouTube and now I know how to do it. So that's one thing. Another thing that I want to recommend is if you're dealing with restlessness or insomnia at night, instead of going to a screen, we talked about doing a digital sunset for this week. So no screen time for an hour before bed. Two things you can consider: Abhyanga, which is self massage, and that's literally taking a seed oil from Walgreens, the grocery store, anywhere. Almond oil is great. You can also use any type of oil that you like. And you start just as we did this morning in the beginning of the practice by massaging the oil in the hands to warm it up. And then you begin at your extremities. And this particular point is called Tal Hridaya, which is connected to our heart. And you start with your hand and you slowly work your way toward your heart. So that's a really nice practice if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with a sensation or feelings of fear in your life. And I know a lot of people are. It's just to calm and bring ourselves back into our bodies. And then the other great one that I like to do is lying in bed, or if I choose to do an evening practice. But you're just lying down and you bring your knees into your chest, and then you just allow the knees to go a little bit wider than the hips so you make room for your belly. And we do that same breath practice where your exhales begin to become longer than your inhales. And I close my eyes, and the reason I like to have the knees a little bit closer to my chest, I have my hands either on the back of my thighs or shins, so I'm pretty much cradling myself, is because as I start to slow down my breath, the actual body starts to open up the back end. So your spine starts to soften, the organs start to draw toward the back of the body, the kidneys and adrenal glands start to relax, this back part of the body. And I do that for about 10 or 12 or 15 breaths. Really great practice before bed. So I wanted to just invite, a little reflection for everybody. We talked about rest, digest, and heal. Um, and I guess the question that I have is, um, what areas in your life are bringing challenge for you to meet self preservation, taking care of self uh, on a daily? What areas in your life do you feel like um, sort of create a barrier for that? And then what would you like to do about it? How could you change that? And when we talk about this, like I said, I like to use self preservation versus self care because inevitably, if I'm doing well, I have space to create care for others. As healers, we are constantly taking care of ourselves and doing all that we can so we can continue the work to heal others. So, what are some challenges or barriers, and what do you need to do to change and make space for that?
I feel like for me, I really resonated with you talking about all the consumption of news in different forms. And for me, when I consume it, I take in this deep empathy for all the pain that's in the world. So it's really hard for me to set boundaries because I feel like then I'm putting up a wall between my privilege and the world that doesn't necessarily have it in the same way. So I love the digital sunset idea, and would love any other suggestions you have of how to set those boundaries in a way that doesn't detach you from what's actually happening in the world, so that we can, I feel like I need that fire in me. I need that empathy so that I want to do something about it.
Yeah, so a couple of things that came to mind. One is that yeah, empathy is important, but I like to use the word compassion because it has sort of this feeling of action. Um, and empathy requires grieving. And if we ever come into a state of like, well, I need to turn off, but I can't because I feel a sense of guilt. I feel a sense of like I'm not doing enough. That might just be a need then to grieve what hasn't been grieved and give yourself space. And um, for white folks, it's like there's a lot of work around undoing, unlearning, um, and understanding white privilege on a regular basis. And that requires rest, digest, and heal. Absolutely. And the more that we get focused into this being a practice so that I can show up in the world, that this is an inner activism, so I can show up and be a part of outer activism, that actually just happens. There's a level of what's called buddhi, a word from the Buddha, discernment, D, to discern what it is I need to do, what it is I don't need to do. And actually, when we do deep meditation or even short meditation, any type of meditation, when we get into a practice on a regular basis, if you can even do it for like 4 times a week, you'll start to notice a shift in what you're called to do in the moment, what you're called to do in your job, what you're called to do in relationships. You'll even notice it in conversation with someone. It's like, this is not what I want, or this is what I want. You'll notice it with food. I'm drawn more toward warmer food because it's cold out. So today I'm not going to have a smoothie. You'll notice it with all kinds of things. So that is called awareness, and we have it, but education in the US doesn't teach us how to take care of ourselves. It doesn't teach us about being more aware of this. It's all about this. It's like the anthropologists of the world that we've become to understand and discern out here, but we know very little about here. And when we get deeply rooted in here, and it really is a deep truth, because when we get into deep truth work, we also have to do shadow work. Like if I'm feeling a certain way about what I'm doing and it's bringing up some tension, what's underneath that tension? What do I need to do to resolve? And loving kindness, because it's really easy to be like all of a sudden in a downward spiral. I think Americans in general are way too hard on ourselves because of the rugged individualism and these sort of lies that we're told of how we have to be in the world. So, mantra is really nice, or some sort of like tenet or word or phrase that not only invokes loving kindness, but purpose. For me, years ago, it was very simple, almost like a live, laugh, love mantra. And I didn't share it with anyone, but it was be responsible, speak truth, awaken your power. The be responsible was at the front. And I don't mean be responsible like show up to work on time. I meant be responsible for my life. Prentice Temple has this really beautiful quote that resilience is not about bouncing back, it is about a commitment to life. And in times where I felt struggle and deep hardship, I felt a lot of that this summer in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Difficult and hard to get up sometimes. And I got up because I wanted that commitment to life. And when I say commitment to life, I don't mean like where my job is going to take me in the next year or my relationships or how I'm going to pay my bills, but a life of living and breathing, being in nature, and experiencing the greater parts of this world that it has to offer. And you know that experience in autumn when, which is, I know, coming to a close, but like a couple of weeks ago, you saw all the colors of the trees. And what did that invite in your body, mind, and spirit? It's change, but it's so beautiful and wonderful. And it's like that looking out to the still lake in nature and being like, oh yeah, I'm not thinking about anything else. This is so pervasive and so like big and so spacious in the presence that I'm in that nothing else is as important. And we have to keep inviting that in. So, yeah, getting into practice and then allowing yourself to feel. We absolutely have to feel our emotions. And if we're not, ask why. Why am I not allowing myself to cry, to be angry, to digest those emotions, not suppress or repress? Does anyone else have thoughts or questions? Don't be shy. Usually, the most small question is often, yeah. Well, it looks like we're kind of at time. But yeah, it
I,
just
I
didn't.
have a quick question if it's possible.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay, so you know how there are some people who are energy vampires and there's some people who bring energy into the room. I'm curious about how you can create a buffer or protection or something to that effect to not be as impacted by other people's energy when you choose not to be.
Yeah. And that's kind of similar to Ariane, to your question of like, how do I create boundaries? So boundary is a very important practice. And when I talked about that mantra of be responsible, that was part of it. That in order for me to be okay, I had to create inner and outer boundaries. So some of the ways that I do that is I consult with radical herbalists in town to get actual tinctures. So one person is Rowan Emmanuel. They're a colleague and dear friend. They're a radical herbalist. And they create tinctures that are literally like boundary and protection tinctures. So that's one thing I'll do. Another one is breath work. So I will do some sort of breath work that will allow whatever energy I'm coming into the day to not like seep into me, so that exhaling slowly down and like allowing myself to ground, because uh, the term you used, energy vampire, but somebody who's like trying to take in too much, you know, whether that's conscious or unconscious, it can unsettle us if we're not settled. So get yourself to a place where you can be settled. And if it's a person that is consistently doing this in your life and it's causing a problem or harm or a barrier, then there's some things that you'll have to do, which is one, decide, do I need to speak on this? Is it important for me to speak in this moment to something that's happening, and not make myself small? And say, you know what, I'm noticing, or I'm feeling into this, I'm sensing into this, like what's going on here? And let it not be like, so you're doing this and I don't like it, because people don't necessarily respond well to that. But you can invite a conversation. If it's not a place where you can have a conversation or say anything, just take care of you. At the end of the day, we cannot control anybody. Uh, we can't control this election outcome. We can't control anything but ourselves. And so, boundaries, incense, burning things, ritual. Ritual is, I think, completely sort of surpassed in the yogic world of the US, that really doesn't see its power on a daily basis. That if you just did one small thing, like light a candle in the morning before going into that space that you know might be triggering, and to say, like, I'm gonna center for myself, take care of myself, create the boundary. I like to do, in Nidra work, you do 3 circles around your entire body where you imagine these like uh, circles of energy of light, and each is a symbol of the physical body, the energetic body, and what is most sacred to you. And that sounds maybe like hocus pocus and imagination, but it's a science. So you try it and see what happens. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarita, for joining us this morning, and thanks everyone who tuned in. We are at time, so I'm going to just let the little bit of audio close us out. Feel free to ask any additional questions in the chat, and then this will be available in Attendify later. So if you're watching the recording, please feel free to let us know your reactions in the chat. And thank you again for joining us this morning.
Peace. Thank you so much. This is great.